I saw that documentary that was Murder in the Bay or something by the guy.
Murder in the Front Row.
Murder in the Front Row.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that really struck a lot of memories for me, like seeing Paul Bailoff and just like that whole scene, because the band that I was in, Diamond, was more of a Van Halen wannabe band compared to the heavier stuff, like what ended up being Exodus and Metallica and Bailoff. But I mean, I would always be hanging out and drinking beer and going to parties and listening to uh, it would be like Ozzy, like when that first Ozzy record came out, and just like living for the music, man. It meant like everything to us.
Oh,
It
I
was
bet.
like it was our life. It was our lifestyle, And Bailoff was extreme, man. He took it to the extreme. He was a bit of a, well, you see it in that documentary, man. He was hard into it, but man, it was a fun scene, and there was a lot of places to play. There was the Keystone family of clubs, which were great clubs. There was the Keystone Berkeley, Keystone San Francisco, Keystone Palo Alto. And I know the Keystone Berkeley was just such a. I grew up like less than a mile away from there, so I could always just walk down to the club and there'd be every band. Like Y&T would be trying out new songs on a Sunday night for $3. I mean, it was an
Wow.
amazing scene. Like looking back on it now, of course, it was just cool. Everything was happening back at the time. You just roll with the flow. That's all you know. But looking back on it, like man, it was so heavy to be part of that because there'd be like Joe Satriani had just moved into town, and so he was like the local music teacher in a little small music store that people would want to go. And you heard about this new guy. Yeah, he's the guy you should go take lessons from. It's like, all right, I'll go meet up with Joe. And so he was happening there, and then Kirk Hammett would come in and take lessons from him, and Alex Skolnick, and all these great players. I mean, there's tons of other ones that people haven't heard of, but like there's so many good players from that area in that era.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a real hotbed. I mean, people like encourage each other and live for the music, and it fed on itself like crazy. So I remember like being 17, 16, 17, and not being old enough to get into clubs, but still being able to play at like the Keystones, especially the Keystone Berkeley. That was like home field. So whenever there'd be
Wow.
playing, like, all right, yeah, you can come in. I remember my
Was
parents coming to see me one time, and there was all these people like front row, just rah! And like my dad thought that someone was going to try and hurt me, like he wanted to try and protect me from it. They walk into the club, and there was a bartender, Brian, who was great, but he's like, "Are you sure you're in the right place?"
was Diamond your first band?
Diamond was There was a group of guys that had a band in Alameda, which is kind of another part of the Bay. There'd be Berkeley, and connecting Berkeley would be Oakland. Like a lot of the bands from Berkeley would have a rehearsal space, maybe that bordered on in Oakland somewhere. And then through the tunnel on the other side of the water, not on the other side of the Bay, but there'd be Alameda. So I hooked up with a couple of guys from Alameda, and they had a band called Tyrant. And this goes way, way, way back. Fumbling through my old stuff, I found a flyer, but it was very Van Halen influenced, and I always looked up to those guys. And at one point, got a chance to join that band and did some gigs, and looked like it was a blast. There would always be a ton of people at these shows, and then that band, the singer and the drummer, that ended up being Diamond, and it was like we were the Van Halen kind of band, and there were Lost Rocket,
Yep.
uh, heavier band. They had the really big draw back then for the local bands. We had a pretty good draw, but once we got outside of like our home base, if we played San Francisco, we wouldn't necessarily draw as well as we would like in Berkeley. But Lost Rocket, they had the explosions, and they were packing them in everywhere.
Yeah,
So yeah, there was
legendary band.
Tyrant, Diamond, and Lost Rocket. Exodus was taking off like crazy because they were like the first band that like got a record. They were actually going to Prairie Sun Studios to record a record. So yeah, my I don't know if you call it a trajectory, but I was in Diamond for a long time, and that was the same thing there, man. We just lived for it. We rehearsed every night. We had an amazing. My mom's a real estate agent in Berkeley. I knew this guy who had a furniture shop, Wix Furniture, and downstairs there was nothing but it was like furniture and appliance. So there'd be nothing but washing machines and refrigerators, huge floor. And we had the entire upstairs. It was like $150 a month. We could go rehearse, and the place was ours. So we rehearsed
Wow.
like all the time and did gigs and lived for it, and pushed each other like crazy, and like I say, wanted to be Van Halen, so I had like a bomb blown out bomb for my pedal board, so stealing stuff from Eddie,
Nice.
stripes on things, tiger striped guitars, and yeah, there would be some pictures that would look really funny if those pictures show up. I'm sure they're out there somewhere, or I've got them in a box somewhere, hidden from public view. But then after that band eventually dissolved, I mean, we did some demos, but nothing happened. In retrospect, it just wasn't as original as what everybody else was doing, like the Exodus and Metallica, and they were like breaking ground with how heavy, and there was other guys that ended up being like Machine Head, and there was like a whole scene. But so that band ended up falling apart for a while. I was also good friends with the guys in Testament before they were Testament.
Legacy.
So I've
Yeah.
known Chuck for a long, long time. And we had a band for a short period of time called Guilt. And one of Chuck's brothers played bass in that band as well. So
Wow.
we did a song on one of Mike Varney's US Metal records, US Metal Volume 4, I think it was. So that was like first, well, not the first time, but that was like kind of cool to actually get into a real studio and do a song. So I
Totally.
did one. So yeah, for all those Chuck fans, don't want to embarrass him, but there's a recording of me and Chuck out there somewhere.
Wow.
uh, so that was, yeah, and that band was called Guilt, which is kind of I thought that was a pretty cool name because a little bit of play on
Yeah.
words with my last name being Gill as well. And yeah, I guess that took me up to the time I ended up moving to Los Angeles and going to GIT. I wanted to go to guitar school.
Yep. Yeah. That's so
Uh,
interesting to hear because I did quite a lot of research and could not find anything on Diamond. It's not on any metal archives, I was trying to find demos, any live footage. I could not. So that's why I'm glad I'm talking to you. So I
I
can
can
learn all
find
about
I
this.
can find some stuff and send it to you. So I'd be happy to
Much appreciated.
have share with you what I have.
Yeah, well, very cool. And that's cool to learn about Diamond. Now, I know you started as like a piano player, right? Like
Well,
you didn't even start as a guitar player.
I did start. I wasn't. I started. I was had piano lessons when I was really young, but I didn't like it. So I was given a guitar when I was 12. So I started when I was 12, and it was kind of around the time that I moved from San Diego up to Berkeley. So when I was 12, then I just got into the guitar right away. I think just people have an affinity for certain instruments. Some people pick up piano and it feels natural for them. For me, it didn't feel natural. But the guitar, I wanted to do that right away and wanted to take lessons, and so I got really into it right away and had the good fortune of hooking up with Joe when I was 13. So I took lessons from
Wow.
him like 13 to 17, and he was doing his band called the Squares. You can hear some Squares stuff out there. Three-piece
Yep.
pop band. He was always just ridiculously like magical. Watching him play it was just crazy. They would have like live fade outs and just do things that
Wow.
none of us could really imagine doing. But yeah, so he was always kind of the sensei. He was always the master. But so I was able to hook up with him for many, many years. And of course, yeah, it was before he became super well known. but you could always tell that he was the man. I remember
Yeah,
taking
yeah.
lessons from a guy before Joe, who was really really good, and he ended up being quite a successful writer. And he was a great player, but he was really into the writing. But he's like, when Joe came to town, he's like, you need to go to Joe. You need to go take lessons from Joe because I wanted to do all that, all that. I wanted to be like Eddie, and Uli Roth.
Yeah, yeah. How much do you feel Joe has influenced your own teaching style?
That's a good question. I've been teaching for a long, long time, and I think that at the time, some lessons with Joe would go well and would be interesting. I think sometimes I'm sure I was a very frustrating student. I was a young teenager and I would have things to do and I wouldn't necessarily come back with my homework and you would feel it. Um, I remember because he would talk about modes, how do certain players have certain sounds they create with the modes, and Joe is big into that. If you study guitar, you know that he's kind of the master of modal guitar playing. And we were studying a Michael Schenker song that happened to be, or we were studying a mode. We were studying Dorian. And then as I walked into the music store, just not for a lesson, but Joe was there hanging out and everybody was hanging out, and this Michael Schenker song came on. And he said, "All right, what mode is that?" And I didn't know the answer. And I was like, oh, I felt so, so bad. So, uh, but I guess it's an interesting question. Like, I don't know, with my teaching style, I mean, everybody is different. And as a teacher and a student, you develop a chemistry with students and you try and figure out, give students something that's going to help them in all ways of guitar playing, with develop their ears, develop, if they want to just learn a song, that's okay. I think in the beginning of my teaching stuff, it was probably more intense. I think I would probably like, okay, you need to learn 5 patterns of this and you need to be able to play, in all keys, and you need to be able to, play 5 different major scales, but do it in one position on the guitar and do all that. And now I'm much more laid back. Like, hey man, if you just want to learn to play this little melodic, you want to play the rhythm from Running with the Devil, and that's because that's what you want out of the guitar, or that's what you have time for in your busy life, then that's totally cool with me. So I think I try and find things that's going to keep people wanting to play, that's going to inspire them to pick up the guitar, even if it's just for 5 minutes in the morning, because it's kind of a cool, fun lick. And I'm still like that too. And I think people are more like that now than ever because of YouTube and things happening so fast and attention spans are shorter. I'm very much like, oh yeah, give me a lick that I can do, give me something that I can just do and feel good about playing like right away. And then of course, if people want to take it further, I'm happy to go way under the hood and get into theory because I like all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
Uh, but there was this was a I unfortunately didn't save my lessons from Joe. Um, but there was something that some other student of his had posted on Facebook, which was an old lesson. He was a friend of mine, and so it was back in the day when I was taking lessons from him. And Joe wrote like the funniest thing, but it was like, um, I wish I could remember the quote exactly, but it's like, don't, allow yourself to sound poorly, or, it was something like this because he didn't do his lesson the right way.
Oh
And it
my
was just
God.
a funny quote. I wish I could remember what it was, but
Wow.
yeah, he was just so good that it was inspiring, and still to this day, there's something about players that have just a real natural feel on the instrument. And some people have that on piano, some people have it on whatever their specialty is. But, Joe would pick up any guitar and have just the buttery vibrato that just you go, ah, oh, yeah, that just feels good to hear. It's not like he's trying too hard to impress or anything. He just take one note and make it sing. And that's, I've come more to that style of playing. Probably like I really appreciate when I hear people that can do just one really, really cool thing. And if they can do everything else on top of that, that's kind of like icing on the cake.
Yeah. Wow. So that's so funny to hear. Wow. Um, Now, how soon after picking up a guitar did you realize you wanted to go to GIT?
I had a friend who went down there before me, and he just got so good. And that was kind of the next logical step in my life at the time, was to go down to LA. So I ended up trading apartments with him. So the timing just worked out. And so, yeah, I made the move. But also at the time, the drummer from that band, Diamond, moved down there at the same time. And same with the singer. And we were going to try and, make it in LA.
Yeah,
Seemed like the
yeah.
place to be, but I had a plan to go to school as well, not just move there for nothing. So yeah, we ended up uh, having that band for a little while, and then it ended up being me and the drummer from Diamond, and we found another bass player, and eventually got another singer, and we before we had a singer, we lived in Long Beach. We lived in a warehouse in Long Beach and showered at the gym. And in the warehouse, we had huge cabinets. And, the drummer was really good at building stuff. So built a bunch of fake Marshall cabinets. And uh,
Classic.
yeah. And so eventually we ended up doing a demo tape, but we didn't have a singer. And we got a singer that was friends with the bass player from back in Minnesota. And then that band ended up being Hericane Alice, which is what I ended up doing for the next so
Yep.
many years.
Yeah. Yep.
So
So,
that's the
it,
long story short with that. It was moved down to LA with some friends from the Bay Area, eventually hooked up with other friends, lived in a warehouse, commuted to I went to the GIT for the year, had that apartment that I got from a friend of mine, but after GIT then I ended up moving to the warehouse. I was like 22, I guess, at the time. And
wow.
then from there I ended up finding a singer, and from there's a pretty cool video on YouTube of a Hurricane Alice reunion, and the singer kind of does a good job of telling the story. So yeah, I don't know if I'm talking too fast or getting
No,
too much.
no,
Hard to
no,
follow the
perfect.
thread of all this
I
crazy
can. I
information.
can. Yeah.
But
You're
once,
touching on some stuff I will ask.
yeah,
So perfect. You're
cool. All
beating me
right,
to it. So just no worries at all. The more info, the better, honestly.
all right, okay, man. I'll keep rolling then. So
Yeah, keep going.
from that point, so living in the warehouse in Long Beach, we got a guy to come out from Minnesota because he was a friend of the bass players. He sang on this demo tape that we had 3 songs. We had done all the music and everything. He just came out and we played our stuff in the car, and he just started mumbling some words, and it was like, yeah, oh my God, that's amazing. That's great. And we went into the studio and he finished his vocals, and bass player friend, this is Ian, who is the bass player in Hurricane Alice. He played it for a friend of his, and his friend's like, "This is great. I got to get it to another friend who's a manager. He was Stevie Nicks' personal manager." And Ian's like, "Well, we don't really even have a band or anything." He's like, "Yeah, just give me the tape, cassette tape." That
Yeah. Yep.
dates myself, if nothing else. But then we got a call from this guy right away. So, I mean, I was driving a yellow Chevy Citation and living in a warehouse, and we got this call to go meet this guy, and he lived at Stevie Nicks' house. So we're driving from Long Beach and in the warehouse, up the 405 into Hollywood, going up in the hills. We keep getting going higher and higher in the hills. We're like, holy shit, where the fuck are we going, man? Where are we going?
Wow.
And it ended up being, she had a bunch of amazing houses. One of them was I think it was called Love Bites, this Jim Carrey movie. Anyway, so we go to this house and it's like, oh my, and met this guy who ended up being our manager, and we ended up getting a record deal. And those guys have been best friends, even though we don't see each other that often, but still super tight and super close. So that was like a lifelong awesome thing that happened for me.
Wow. That must be crazy going from the warehouse and then driving up the hill. And
Yeah,
you're
and
saying
it's
it was in a
funny.
movie as well?
Yeah, the house, one of her houses was in the movie. I think it was called Love Bites. It was a Jim Carrey where he's a vampire movie. Like they
Yeah,
rented her
yeah,
house
yeah.
for the movie. So yeah, that was the house.
Wow.
And so there'd be like lots of stories. So yeah, when it comes to like the LA scene and name dropping. I can do a bunch of name drops, but it sounds, it's like embarrassing. But it's just kind of cool to look back at the time and say, yeah, I met this guy and jammed with this guy, and this is so. Uh, yeah,
So much was going
not that
on.
anybody would remember me at all, but I mean, I remember going to lunch with our when we hooked up with this manager. Uh, he was friends with Jimmy Iovine, who, of course, Jimmy Iovine ended up being a mogul to say the least. But I remember me and Ian straight up going up the hill and meeting this guy. Like literally within a week, we're having lunch with me and our manager and Ian with Jimmy Iovine. It's like, what the,
Wow.
you know? And yeah, so it was wild. And Stevie Nicks would have parties. We get invited to her parties. I remember Eddie Van Halen coming to a party. Our drummer at the time was really tall, and Eddie drove up in his Ferrari, and he's like, "If you can get into this car, you can have it," And of
Wow.
course, could fit in the car. But just like such good times, man. I have nothing but the super fond memories. So I feel like I was pretty fortunate to be in the Bay Area scene when that was all happening, and looking back and watching Metallica become the biggest, from that to becoming the biggest band in the world, to being part of like an LA music scene as well. Never hit the big time like many of those other bands, but I certainly enjoyed it while it was happening.
So much was happening in the 80s, and it is crazy because Metallica back in the day were opening for like Laz Rocket and Bitch and stuff. And now
I
they're
know
like the
it's
biggest touring band ever.
I know, and I didn't get it. Like I said, I was into the Van Halen scene. I mean, I loved the Iron Maiden, Richie Blackmore, except that kind of stuff. I mean, I just played the shit out of that stuff. I would just turn it up and turn. Mom would leave the house, and I'd be just vinyl on and cranking, balls to the wall and
Hell yeah.
breakers, all that stuff. I love that stuff. But as far as the bands that I was in, it was much. It was more like I keep describing as the Van Halen thing, kind of the happier up tempo stuff. But like when Metallica came out, that first record, like I didn't get it. I get it now, but I was a little late to the party. I'm like, this is scary. And now
Yeah.
it's like now the newer bands after them are scary with all the
Yeah,
super
now
growl.
it's like baby music compared to what's out now,
Yeah,
just the
yeah.
death metal, black metal, crazy stuff. That is really cool to hear. So Hurricane Alice, I'd love to know the writing and recording process of Tear the House Down, if you can recall any of that.
Yeah, so we had our budget, which, at the time, bands spent a lot of money that they ended up owing the record company on records, but now everybody can get the same quality pretty much anywhere. But at the time, so we had 6 weeks at A&M Studios, which is insane. A&M Studios, I don't even know if it's still there. I assume it's still there. Maybe it has a different name. I don't really know. But on La Brea, it's one of the best. I mean, I remember being in there, and in one room was U2, another room was Rage Against the Machine, and another room was
Wow.
us. So
Wow.
yeah, you would see people in the hallway. It's like yeah, it was kind of crazy. So yeah, we were able to camp out there, and it was somewhat of, in retrospect, I really wished, not to put blame on anybody or badmouth anybody, but I wonder what would have happened if we had had uh, a team like like the Tom Werman team that were putting out like the Motley Crue records, or like Dwayne Barron and those guys who were doing the Ozzy records. So they also did Motley Crue, like who knew how to make those records like we worshipped. Uh, so our record didn't come out like quite what we were hoping for. And listening back on it, some of the stuff hit the mark. A lot of the stuff didn't hit
Hmm.
the mark. But I mean, look, we had 6 weeks in there. There were studio rentals, so This Marshall's not sounding so good. Okay, we'll just make a phone call and a bunch of new Marshalls will be delivered to the studio. Like, it must be
uh,
crazy to live that life all the time. I had a 6 week taste of it. Uh,
wow.
but it's a real privilege to be able to do that. But when you're in there just working and stressing out over the minutia, it's work. It's stressful. You're you get frustrated with people. Tempers get short, but you're never too far away from the rainbow when you're in Hollywood. So you were able to blow off steam pretty well. It's also.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. How was it revisiting, like even playing live again at that 25-year reunion after
Oh,
all that time, that first time getting on stage and returning to that music? How did that feel?
a little. It felt great because, like I said, the guys are we're we've remained amazing friends, like just the closest of friends. Even still writing some songs long distance with each other,
Oh, wow.
but to play those songs feels dated now. To go back in time. There's some of the stuff that's still kind of fun to play, but to do a whole show with the old material, it feels it feels a little old.
It's definitely Bay Area, it's
Yeah.
definitely in that scene.
Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
if we were
It's
to do
good
more
though.
stuff, it'd be good to do a whole other record and a little, to have some new inspiration because you don't want to live in the past, man. You gotta move forward to be inspired for things.
100%. Are you
Yeah.
open to that? Making another Hurricane Alice record?
Sure. I live in Sweden, so it's
Might be a little difficult.
a little difficult, easier than it would have been so many years ago, but there's nothing quite like getting in the room with people and making things happen. You can do things like I've done some songs with the guys, and it's been pretty cool. But we haven't done a whole project, but I'm always open to writing songs.
Hell yeah, man. That's awesome. And it
Yeah,
would be awesome to see, especially to see the evolution of the like songwriting and just like creative process from
yeah,
that first album.
yeah. I know Bruce, the singer, recently did a Hurricane Alice gig with. He was the him with other guys. It was just him from the original band.
Yeah. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
I know you've been doing stuff with Lick Library. Um,
Yeah,
how have you it's been a while, right?
I've been doing that for a long time.
Long
Yeah.
time. How'd you get involved with them?
I've always taught guitar. Um, I remember there was like back in the day there'd be like the magazines Metal Edge and Circus Magazine and all those, and do little interviews, and one of my quotes was, "Well, I want to like write for guitar magazines and do video lessons. I can't." And yeah, so here I am many years later. That's what I'm doing. Uh, I hooked up with them because I had a student here in Sweden who had a book that was really good. This was kind of before you could have such easy access to everything online. And I was surprised at how good it was because most of them were not so accurate. And I noticed the company was in the UK, not so far from where I live now. So I just contacted them asking if there was something I could do for them. Well, not even that, just like introducing myself basically. And so they said, okay, well, why don't you do this little column for us and, a little recording, little writing. I did that and it just kind of snowballed into like one thing after another. So yeah, I've been working with them for so many years now. Like, so yeah, many, many projects for Lick Library, and then uh, I started with them right when DVDs were first happening. That's how long ago it
Oh,
was.
wow.
So now, of course, everything is streaming. But so I don't say how many DVDs I've recorded, but how many projects, I guess, I've done.
YouTube videos.
Hundreds and hundreds. It's like so many. Some of them are like lessons that are just general, my own take on rock lead guitar or rock rhythm guitar, or I've done Metallica bass guitar. I've done classical guitar. Yeah,
Wow.
everything pretty much. So sometimes it's just my take on things, and sometimes it's learning complete albums. They call it the classic albums. So I've done a lot of those projects where it's like every song from a record, or sometimes it's like a jam with project. So you get the songs and you also get the backing tracks, and you can kind of put yourself in the music. I've done things where there's like all different ways of trying to have an interactive online lesson where teach a little solo and take it intermediate, beginning, intermediate, advanced. And so, okay, I'm going to play for 4 bars, and then you try and copy this for 4 bars. Okay, now I'm going to play, and now you do your own thing for 4 bars. And trying to make it, even though I'm not in person with somebody, but trying to make it interactive as well. So I've done so many. I lost track of them at a little over 100. I was counting up to 100, and then I stopped doing that many years ago.
Wow,
So if
that's so
anyone's
awesome.
interested, yeah, look up my name,
Yeah.
go to Lick Library. But if you Google my name or just go to Amazon and put my name in, there'll be a whole bunch of stuff that comes out.
Also your website as
My
well.
website, go to Spotify, and put in my name. Although there's a religious Danny Gill as well, that's not
Oh.
me. So
Wow. So I know you've been doing a lot of teaching. You also like worked at GIT as
yeah, that
well,
was my
right?
home sweet home.
Yeah. So what made you like be like, I actually don't want to leave. I'm gonna stick
Yeah,
here and
that was it.
actually teach. Yeah.
Oh, it was the best environment in the world. You're just around people who have the same passion as you. And so when I went to school, it was a 1 year program. It's different now. You can actually go to a 4 year degree program if you want to, or you can go for less amount of time or more. For me, at the time, it was a 1 year program. Like Paul Gilbert was 6 months ahead of me. He had just
Oh.
graduated 6 months before.
Wow.
Started teaching there when I was a student. Yeah, so I had Paul for my private lessons at GIT. It's amazing.
Wow.
Uh, so after I graduated from there, it was like my home. It was just like the perfect fit for me with the teaching, with the energy, with the personality, everything. So I'm like, can I stay here and do something? I'll teach for 1 hour a week. And, they had like open counseling, they call it, where you're just in a room and people can come in and jam on whatever you want to jam or talk about whatever you want to talk about. So ended up getting more hours and more hours until I became full time. Uh, so I loved that place, and I was there a long time ago. Like it was um, the first half of the year I was there. The school was so small; it was above the Wax Museum on Hollywood Boulevard. And then
Oh,
halfway through
wow.
my school year, it moved to what became the new building, which has since expanded, but it has the same address on McHatton in Hollywood. So yeah, eventually, and they were always very cool if I was doing like the Hericane Alice thing and needed to go on the road for a while and come back, could always come back. So it was great. It's been a few years since I went back and visited, but the last time I was there visiting, it was really emotional seeing some old friends. It was great. And then many years ago, there was also a big reunion they had, which was just wonderful to see everybody. And it was a reunion for everybody from my year. So I saw, uh, old roommates I hadn't seen in a long time, and amazing players would come in and play. Like Larry Carlton was playing some songs that night, and just yeah, I mean it's for
Totally.
anybody, I
Wow.
feel very fortunate because for anybody who loves to play, to have that opportunity to just play all day and to be in that environment where you can just learn from not only amazing teachers. There'd be Scott Henderson there, and there's a bunch of guys that aren't as well known but equally as valuable. Keith Wyatt, Dan Gilbert, just amazing players and great teachers. But I remember just going to the orientation, and they said, "You guys are going to learn as much from each other as you will from us. So, you can sleep later." And that was so true because
Yeah.
that's the environment.
Yeah. Wow. So being around all those greats and doing everything you've done, I'd love to know what was like the best advice you ever got as a guitar player.
The best advice. I don't know what
Do
to
you know?
say that's not going to be too cliched. But
Follow your dreams.
well, you have to just love it, right? You can't do it for you can't do it for the money because unless you happen to get really uh and well, not luck, it takes a lot of skill. Uh but you have to love what you're doing. But I think that if you find something in life that you love to do, then you go for it. I mean, I can't imagine doing anything like the guitar is me. I can't imagine me not being with my instrument, or it's my personality. It's what I talk about. It's what I geek out about. It's what I try and get to sound good. It's what I love to do. So, I mean, the best advice that I can give is if you love it, then that's all it takes. Enjoy
Beautifully
it.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, not everybody needs to do it for a career. So I think there's so many people that uh, now have exposure to great lessons on YouTube. And if they can practice play for 15 minutes a day, that's cool too.
Yeah. Must feel so awesome because on YouTube, like I've seen some of the views, some of the lessons
Yeah.
you've done, I've gotten, and it must feel awesome, to have influenced so many people. There's people who might, become famous that you'll have no idea, because they
Yeah.
watched your YouTube videos religiously, for a year or something. So it
It's
must
pretty
feel really
humbling,
cool.
man. It's
Yeah.
really humbling. People are so nice, like embarrassingly nice sometimes. And it's really, I mean, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And at the same time, man, it's hard when you get the harsh critiques. And if they're the harsh critiques, and I know it's something I can't do anything about, and it's just being silly, for whatever physical appearance, then that rolls off me. But as for something like I didn't do well, all that bothers me a lot. But I
Oh,
think that
wow. I
also
can
for
imagine.
if you're gonna teach, it's you can make money as a teacher, and like people who you don't have to go to GIT or a school environment like that to be a good player. Obviously, there's so many amazing players that haven't been through that environment. But I guess what it taught me was how to explain things. So then I was able to be a more successful teacher by just being able to kind of get a good grip on how to convey information. So I'm not just kind of, there's always stuff I'm going to learn. I'll go to my grave never knowing this much of what I could possibly know. But just being able to explain stuff has been uh, really helpful for me to be able to be a teacher.
Yeah. Really cool.
Take it apart a little bit. You don't have to know how to build a 13 chord to be able to play a 13 chord and be able to play something really cool over it. But I can say, okay, this is what it's built from, and here's some cool things that work well with this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing I feel like with guitar playing, the more you learn, the more you realize the ceiling just gets higher and higher
Oh,
and
yeah,
higher.
yeah, never. Yeah. I mean, I I've been playing for 48 years, 47 years. Crazy amount of time. Um, yeah, and it feels like uh, sometimes I get in the zone and I feel like, okay, this is great. I can do something. But most of the time, it's like I feel like I'm just learning and learning and learning all the time and have a long ass way to go.
Yeah, man. This has been really awesome, and it was so nice meeting you.
Yeah, you
Great,
too,
great
Brandon.
discussion. Now, what's the best way for people to just stay updated with everything you do?
You can go to my website, dannygill.com. Feel free to get in touch with me there anytime. There's a lot of like lesson material. You can go to Lick Library if you're interested in any kind of lessons. There's tons of stuff there, not only myself, but lots of great players. Andy James, Guthrie Govan. I'm sure I'm leaving a lot of people out right now, but those guys just come to mind.
A lot of
Um,
greats.
yeah, uh, you can listen to some of my stuff on Spotify. I didn't talk about another band that I had for a while called Speak No Evil that maybe you want to listen to on Spotify. They did 2 records that was on Universal. That can be kind of
Awesome.
that's a little heavier, well, a lot heavier than Hericane Alice. Um, so yeah, Speak No Evil did 2 records. You can listen to that stuff on Spotify. Yeah, if you're interested in any of the stuff that
Yeah.
any of my goods, Amazon, put my name in
Yeah.
there, a bunch of stuff will come up.
Would you ever want to, if you're saying you have like, you potentially have some diamond stuff, would you ever put it out there, like on YouTube or anything?
Let me see what I can find. I have like a bunch of cassettes that I need to digitize, and I don't know what
Wow.
I'll find on there, but I
I
do
don't,
have
how do
some
you even do
pictures.
that?
I do have some pictures as well, so I'll send you some stuff. But I'll
Awesome.
go through. I mean, I remember this happened. I moved into this place 4.5 years ago, and as I was going through stuff from my old place, I'm like, I've got like DAT tapes, and like I don't know where to find a DAT player. Do you remember those? You're too young.
No, I know of them though. I
Yeah.
work at a record store, so
Okay.
I've heard of those. How do you even digitize like a cassette?
I guess I would just take my cassette player and the 2 auxiliary outs into my
Oh yeah, true.
sound card and do it that way.
Yeah, because that'd be some
So,
cool stuff. Because there's no diamond on
yeah.
the internet.
So that
Was
would
there
be
like
possible. If I have stuff on DAT and the DAT tape, I don't know where to find a DAT player.
I've only heard of them. I've never even seen one.
Yeah.
So
I mean, they're
yeah.
just little small things, but it's the quality of like a recordable CD, but it's the actual tape.
Wow. Did Diamond ever have like a band logo or anything?
We did. Um, I'll see what I've got and make some photocopies.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Okay. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. All right. This has been awesome, man. This was a lot of fun. My name's Brandon Battick, and this is Disturbing the Priest.